I never knew that Pastor Carter was not like the pick.
No, he was not the pick. He is plan B. And he was like, so Pastor Bailey said, I'm going to be plan B. I'm going to be his assistant. I was like, that's a lie. We all know. You know, at church, you know the things at church. You're like, oh, no, that's going to be so-and-so. And you're like, so-and-so said no.
Hold up. That's a whole message in itself, though. What God has for you is for you. And when I say being plan B, and that's a lot of times, people need to hear that. Because a lot of people are looking at their lives right now, and they are second, third, fourth man on a totem pole, and they are, number one, envious sometimes of the people before them, or that seem to be ahead of them. Sometimes it makes you question yourself and question your, like you need more validation. You're questioning your worth because there's so many people ahead of you. But when God says it's your turn, there's not a devil in hell. It's not a man on this planet that can stop where God is assigning you. Welcome to The Dash. You know, The Dash is that tiny line between your life start date and end date. It's your story, the chapters in your book, your journey. Get ready for real conversations with real people telling real stories about the realities of failure, setbacks, and success. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go. We're rolling. Let's go. The Dash in 3, 2, 1.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Lady Jade. Welcome to the Dash Podcast. I am so excited that you guys joined us today because, just every once in a while you get to talk to people that keep it real, and they're going to be super authentic. And our guest today, she is just that. But before I introduce her, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share with a friend. And do me a favor, make sure you hit that subscribe button. That's what I need you to do. Just hit that subscribe button, all right? And let everybody know that the Dash is popping, all right? Our guest today, you guys probably know her as, it's so funny to say this, as First Lady.
It sounds so official.
Yeah, it does. She is the First Lady of Concord Church in Dallas, which is one of the largest churches in Dallas for those of you that are tuning in that, are not from here. And her name is Stephanie Carter. A lot of people call her Lady Carter, but I call her LC, Stephanie. First of all, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I feel so honored.
Oh my gosh, you're so funny. I wanted to have you as a guest because a lot of times when you think about having a conversation with a First Lady, you're like, okay, this is going to be one of them conversations. They're going to talk about the Lord the whole time. But we're not, because that's what I love about you. You have such a genuine life of balance. And this was not always the plan. So the thing about the Dash, it's that little line between your birth date and your death date, and it's your journey, it's your story. Your story is not where you thought it would be.
No.
So I want to go back. Before you were First Lady, who is Stephanie Carter?
Okay, so Stephanie Carter was a student at the University of Oklahoma, Boomer Sooner.
Yeah.
And I was living my best life, and I met this guy my sophomore year. I had got into my sophomore year of, I am not going to be chasing after dudes, football players. I don't know how cute they are. I'm not going to be chasing. And I'm just going to focus on my studies. So that's how I kind of went into my sophomore year. And then I had a couple of friends who kept saying, oh, you got to meet this guy. You got to meet this guy. And I kept like, nope. I'm not trying to meet anybody. So I met him. They introduced me to him. They used me to dance with his fraternity brothers. And here I'm thinking this dude wants to meet me. But no. He looked down at me like, oh, hello. And I was like, oh no, I left a perfectly good looking Kappa across the room to come over here to talk to you. And you kind of look down at me like, hello, because he's taller than me.
Right.
And so then his fraternity brother, Brandon, asked me to dance. And I was like, no, I'm out of here. So anyway, make a long story short, we've been married 25 years in June.
This is who we all know as Pastor Brian Carter,
yes.
Senior pastor of Concord Church. So y'all met in college.
So we met at college at a Kappa party. And here's the funny thing. We met at this, back then it was called the Big 8 Conference on Black Student Government, but now it's like the Big 12 Conference. And so we met like at I can't remember I think it was at Kansas or Mizzou. We met at Mizzou or whatever. So then we went on spring break.
Okay.
So when we came back from spring break, my friends asked me like, hey, do you want him to call you? I was like, who? And like, Brian. I was like, girl, yeah, sure, he can call me.
Yeah.
So he calls me and we just had like the best conversation. And you know, you talk to somebody, but you can really talk to somebody.
Yes.
And yeah, we just had great conversation. And when he would say he would do something, he would do it. So if he said, I'm going to call you after class, or I'm going to call you at 4, he would do that.
Oh, they don't make them in 2023. I can promise you that.
Yeah. They weren't making them back then either. And so that's why it was so shocking. Like when people asked me, it was just the little things. And then I remember I said, before I gave my friends my number so he could call me, I said, okay, now tell me something about him. And they're like, okay, well, he's an alpha. I was like, okay. And they're like, and he's like the president of OSU. I was like, okay, yeah, all right. And then like, he's a minister. I was like, absolutely not.
Oh my God, I would have thought the same thing.
Not. I cannot.
Oh my
And they're like, no,
gosh.
Stephanie, he's really, really nice. Come on, just try. So yeah,
So he was actually a minister back then.
he was a minister back then.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Yeah, no, I don't know how you did it. I would have done the same thing. Oh my gosh.
And so the interesting thing was he was just really, really nice. He was just a really, really nice guy.
But did he give you minister vibes like all the way around?
He didn't give me minister vibes because he wasn't like, when you think minister, you just think he's praying all the time and he's just a serious like holy roller. But you know what? I think one thing that kind of helped me like ease into dating him and like be comfortable with him and be myself around him was the quarterback at our school was an Omega. So you already know.
Yeah.
And he was a minister. Yes. So I got to, I would see him at the party. I would see him. So it was just like, oh, he's just a regular old dude.
Right.
And he's a great guy. So.
That's a really good point that you bring up, because when we think of minister, like you said, we think of somebody that is going to sit there the whole time and judge everything you're doing and tell you why you're in sin and that you're going to hell and blase, blase. But it sounds to me like some people like to label and say like it's a double life, but no, it's balance. And being a football player or being an alpha or being a regular college student is not a sin, right? And these are just young men that had a calling on their lives.
Yes.
And I think that oftentimes we put a lot of pressure on our clergy, on our ministers and our pastors to, like, it's almost like we expect them to be the priest, the pope.
Expect to be both. Now I'm saying you got to have some integrity. Now we were in college.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You can't be living foul in these streets.
Yeah. Yeah. There is to whom much is given, much is required.
Right.
I don't want to see if I'm at the club.
You don't want to see us at the club.
I don't want to see you my pastor at the club. I just don't. That's just like, you're not going to be in the club with me. I mean, y'all can go to the restaurant and, y'all can even sit at the bar, but I don't want to see my pastor in the club.
Y'all, okay, this is so funny. Okay, so Valentine's Day, this is just recently, y'all. We're there. We're like 2 other ministry couples. One's a pastor, one's like another ministry person. And the waitress walks by and she brings us 2 drinks. She's like, I'm from Concord. I just want to give you guys these drinks. And we were like, and so our friends were like, dang, what y'all teaching? So then like later on, somebody brings us
Some more drinks.
Yes, they send shots. And they were like, what are y'all teaching at the Good Concord Church? So our members, they playing a joke. They're like, it's not really shots, it's water. I said, yeah, y'all making us look bad. Like, we just out here in the streets wilding. Y'all sending the pastor and his wife shots.
Oh my God.
But anyway, it was, but yeah,
So then so obviously you weren't planning on being a first lady. And at that time, he didn't know he was going to be a minister. What were your dreams and goals at that time?
So I was going to OU to be an elementary teacher.
Oh, nice.
And so we got married in May of 98. We graduated in May of 98, got married in June of 98, and then moved to Fort Worth.
Oh, y'all got married right after graduation.
We got married like right after graduation.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I was a teacher. I taught 3rd grade. He taught 6th grade. And then we joined Concord Church like July.
So you guys were members? Just
we were
at the
members.
time?
We were just members. And then we were volunteering. Like we had not planned, like now I know I had not planned to volunteer at all. But the children's pastor at the time, he was like, hey, are you a teacher or something? I heard you're like a teacher or something. And I was like, yes, but I do not plan to do Sunday school because I work with kids all week. He's like, well, what grade do you teach? I was like, oh, I teach 3rd grade. He's like, well, how about 2nd grade? I just need you twice a month. So anyway, we were just teaching and volunteering. And then I was on the track to be, you know, as an educator, you're a teacher first, then you're an instructional specialist, then you're a vice principal, then you're a principal. So I was kind of on that track. So when he got called, let me see. Oh, yes, let me go back. Okay, so we were teaching for like a year. After that 2nd year, we were named Teacher of the Year, both of us at our schools.
Oh, nice.
Like I came home, I was like, guess who is Teacher of the Year? And he's like, me too.
Oh, snap. Wow.
So, yeah, so he taught at Dunbar Middle and I taught at Harlingville Elementary. So then a year later, he was asked to be on staff. And so that was huge. Like he grew up in Oklahoma City. He's lived in the same house all of his life. And he grew up just not seeing full, like if you were a preacher, you were not in full-time ministry being paid. You you had your
like
job.
An evangelist?
You had your job and then you did church on the weekend.
Gotcha.
And stuff.
Okay.
So this full-time staff, being staffed at a church was like unheard of. And that's not what he had grown up in. So even like I was like, oh, you're going to be on staff? Okay. But so it was.
Keep it real though.
Our families were terrified for us because we had just bought a house. So yeah, our story is crazy. So we got an apartment as soon as we got married. And then we realized like, okay, this apartment living is so expensive.
Right.
We need to get a house.
Right.
So my parents were like, well, we can't afford to give you guys like a down payment, but you guys can live with us and stay for your house. So we living with my parents, y'all. We would look like an episode out of Good Times. I mean, that's a whole nother story. So anyway, we save for this house and then we get the house, move in. We're in the house like maybe 2 months. And Pastor Bailey calls. And Pastor Bailey is
He was at that time
Yes, he's the founding pastor of Concord Church. And, you know, we thought he was like Michael Jackson. Like, if he spoke to us, we're like, oh, my goodness.
That's how it is. Like, that's how back in the day, that's how it used to be with the pastors. They were so, what is the word I'm looking for? It was like we would put them up on this pedestal of like, oh, my gosh.
If he spoke to us, we were just like, oh, my gosh. So he calls. I'll never forget. It's July 4th weekend because Brian is outside, like getting dirt. We were working on landscaping in our house.
Right.
And he was like, hey, the Lord has put you on my heart. And I would love for you to be on staff. Because a lot of people ask us, like, how did you get on staff? Who did you know? Who did you put your resume in? And sometimes you just have to get involved in church, especially no matter what size church you're at, whether you're at a small church, whether you're at a church that has millions. Get involved because that church becomes so much smaller. Yeah. And the other thing that Pastor Bailey took notice with him was one of his professors was Pastor Bailey's classmate, and they had a college reunion at Concord. And so, of course, my husband goes to speak to her, and it's like, oh, it's so good to see you. And so she tells Pastor Bailey later, if you ever need somebody, that boy was a leader at our school. He was this, he did this. And so that remained on Pastor Bailey's heart. Yeah. So here we are a year later, and he asked him to be on staff. So, of course, we're nervous because we're like, what is this staff? I mean,
what does that mean?
What is going on? Because, you know, as an educator, like my generation, like millennials are completely different, but my generation, you got a steady job, you got good insurance, you got benefits, you know where this job is going.
Absolutely.
So to our family and friends, they were like, you going to work for the church? Are you, I don't know. Like, oh, okay. So, but to see him work at church, he was so excited. Yeah. He was thriving. He was living his best life.
So he walked away from his teacher job. Did you?
No. Remember, he worked for the church, so
she was like, "We gonna have to have some stability."
So we have to have some stability, and plus, it was still my dream to be a vice principal and a principal. So unfortunately, our founding pastor he had cancer, And so this was his second bout with cancer. And so we had not been there for his first bout, but as members of Concord, they had, they had told us like, oh yes, we prayed him through that. We're going to pray him through this. And it never was a question that he was not going to make it.
Right.
It was just like, oh, he beat this. He's going to beat it again. And then, when he started going through the process, he realized that I need a successor. I need I need an assistant. And then my assistant, if something happens to me, and I'll never forget him saying this to the church. He said, I'm not saying that I'm not going to make it or this, that, but I have to make sure our church has a plan. Pastor Bailey was way ahead of his time. I mean, even with having a full-time staff and benefits and so on, he was way ahead of his time. But he also was so way ahead of his time because he wanted to make sure that Concord had a foundation and had could keep going in the future and so on. And
kudos to him for that. Oftentimes we don't want to face the reality that, not to say that he knew then, but eventually one day all of us will no longer be here.
Right.
We don't like to think about that. We don't like to plan ahead. We don't like to put things in place. We like to live in this fantasy world that I don't want to talk about death. I don't want to, but so kudos to him for actually implementing a plan and putting it in place.
Having a plan. And I would say even to my generation, I'm 49 and I mean,
it's good, girl.
I know, girl. I work hard.
Okay.
And, we have to make sure that we're leading someone. I always feel like you should have somebody walking ahead of you, beside you, and you should be pulling somebody up.
Ooh.
Because you're not going to be here. And why hold on to that? I'm a couple of friends with some millennials. I did a discipleship group, and one of them said, she was like, I'm not used to older women pouring into me. Shame. That just hurt me so much that older women are not willing to share how they got here. And it's not like a competition. There's room for everyone.
But society will having you think otherwise. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, look, it's funny. I had a conversation. This was maybe 4 years ago with a friend of mine. And I can remember us sitting at a coffee shop and she's planning for some, future events she has coming up. And I just remember her saying, you know what? There are women that are older than me that could be sitting here at the coffee shop helping me. She was like, but they're a bunch of mean girls. And it broke my heart too, because I was just thinking like, dang, you're right. Like, and not everybody, of course, but there is a level of intimidation. I don't know what it is about society or sometimes us that we hoard information. It's like, if I teach you and I show you, then you may surpass me. But isn't that always the goal? Like, don't you want to duplicate yourself?
I want to duplicate myself, but I also want to see you win, because if you win, then I win. And I feel like, I have friends in just different areas and I can cheer for them and be so happy for them because that's what God has for them.
Yeah.
And I can rest in what God has for me.
And it may look similar.
It may look similar, but it may look different, but that's okay.
Yeah, and it's the thing, it's enough. Like,
it's enough.
Look, you the first lady, but you can't be the first lady of everybody.
Yeah, I don't want to. The saints, I love y'all.
Yeah.
The saints. Look, ministry.
I'm glad y'all spread out.
Yeah, ministry is hard, and I think that's the lesson that I've learned. Just being in ministry, it'll be like 20 years, I think, next year. Oof. That we've been in full-time ministry, and there's been wins, there've been losses, but that's just seasons of life. It's the same thing in our marriage. There have been wins, there's been seasons of, yeah, great, we are connecting, and then there's seasons of we're at 70-30. I think about one season where when he was in seminary, we had 2 young kids. They were bad. Oh, they were bad. Blessings to them now. They're grown up. But during that season, it was just really, really hard. I'm adjusting to the fact, because I eventually left elementary. I left Fort Worth ISD and came home because it was my own words he used against me in our premarital counseling. I said, both of us can't have 2 demanding jobs.
But you meant him.
Yeah, not me. And it was and I'm thankful for that season, but that was a hard season for me. But if I had to look back over it again, I'm so thankful that I was home, that I was able to pour into my kids for that season because they needed me. They needed to have that stability. My what was going on with my husband and what he was dealing with as a pastor and just trying to navigate this new world, we both could not have survived.
So it's funny you bring that up. So there is a point where you say your husband was in seminary school. You were at the time still pursuing this dream of eventually becoming a principal, right? And because he has this calling, now you have to walk away from this dream. How was that for you emotionally at that time? Because I'm sure you weren't like, oh, yes, I surrender. Yeah.
Oh, no, I did not
No,
surrender.
because y'all, I always say this, and I mean this in the most respectful way possible. What I love about you is she is classy. She is, when you see her, she is first lady. But she she got the little gangster in her. Listen, like, it just is what it is. Yeah, I'm sure that was difficult.
It was really, really hard. And I think my main beef with him was, I didn't feel like you saw my sacrifice. I don't think you saw how much it hurt. I don't think you saw. And then when he did see me, I was able to release. I was able to release the bitterness. I was able to release just feeling like, man, you don't see me at all. You don't realize, like, I've given up my whole dream so you can pursue your dream. And I had to stop looking at it like that because I looked at it as I have these two little faces that I need to take care of.
Because was there ever a point in time, and if I'm going too deep, like, stop me, but was there ever a point in time where you were kind of resentful about it?
Oh, yeah. I was resentful for it. Okay, my first resentment was I had to deal with a quote unquote first lady issue. And I can't get into it, but I was just like, you asked me to quit my job for this.
Okay, hold on. We got to back up. Okay, because we already at first lady. Okay.
Yeah.
So Pastor Bailey passes away.
I'm pregnant with, at his installation, I'm pregnant with our second daughter.
Okay, so when Pastor Bailey passes away, like, Brian is being, your husband, Pastor Carter, is being, like,
installed.
Is that what they call it?
Yes.
Look, I was like,
yes.
Inducted. I don't know what they call it, Pastor.
He's being installed. I'm pregnant with Kennedy. He was installed in February. I gave birth to Kennedy in June 2000.
So you were good and pregnant. Yeah.
I was good and pregnant. So this is 2004.
So everything you knew, he was just on staff.
And I was living my best life. And I remember I had a great principal. Her name is Pat Scott. I love her to this day. She, like, pulled me to the side when I told her I was pregnant with Kennedy. She was like, you're probably going to have to go. You're probably going to have to go home. Stephanie, do you realize what they're saying about y'all in the streets? That the church is going to fail. This young pastor does not know what he's doing. Like, I'm 49, so this is 20 years ago. So we were a good 24 and have this legacy of this great church. He was a national pastor, national leader. I can't even say national. I have to say international. The conference that he founded, we're still doing.
That Pastor Bailey founded?
That Pastor Bailey founded. And it's such a legend. If you say E.K. Bailey, yes.
So to come behind him,
them, and I think one thing that blessed us was we were living in Mansfield. We weren't living in Dallas. We had bought our first house in Mansfield.
Okay.
So Mansfield, back then Mansfield only had one high school.
And two houses, and one of them was yours because Mansfield was not developed back then.
Yeah, Mansfield was not Mansfield back then, that it is now. So we were completely naive to what the people in the streets were talking, because Mansfield's not talking about it. Fort Worth is not talking about it. But because my principal knew me and she had some other friends, she knew, like, oh, this is like a big deal. And then my parents lived in Fort Worth. They lived like Lake Country, Eagle Mountain Lake. So they don't know. They weren't attending church in Dallas. So we had no clue. And I think that's what saved us. We were completely naive to the game.
So Pastor Bailey passes away. Now, look, I don't, again, what is it called? Installed?
Yes,
Because I was about to say, now he's taking the throne. Lord, I need to learn this language. So now he's being installed. But the reality of it is, coming behind someone with that reputation, that is a nationally known minister and leading the masses, and you're walking into this congregation that is used to seeing Pastor Bailey, and it's like, who are y'all? I'm sure, I don't know if you can say this, but everybody couldn't have been happy about it.
No. So, but I will say this. This is why he was a leader before his time.
Okay.
He had a plan A. My husband was plan B. Plan A said no.
Really?
So plan A said no. And this is how naive we were to the game, especially for me. I don't know about my husband, but I know for me, speaking for me, I was completely naive to the game.
Because you're not in ministry at the time.
I'm not in ministry. I have no idea. I'm just, whatever. I'm doing my job. So I remember when they announced, so I can tell the timeline. When they announced I had given birth to Caitlin, when he asked my husband to be his assistant, he was like, we have to go before a church vote. I'll never forget, it was a Wednesday night. I was talking to my best friend because I always talk to her on Wednesday night. He's like, I need you to get off the phone with Michonne. I have big news to tell you. And he was like, so Pastor Bailey said I'm going to be plan B. I'm going to be his assistant. And I was like, that's a lie. We all know. Church, you know the things at church. You're like, oh, no, that's going to be so-and-so. And you're like, so-and-so said no. And so I'm plan B. And there's going to be a vote there's going to be a church meeting and a vote on Saturday. This is me. I'm still in my teacher mode. I was like, oh, well, I meet with my new teachers on Saturday morning, and I'll be there right after I get done with that. I come to that meeting, and this is how naive I am. I'm thinking like a church meeting, it's going to be like maybe 10, 15 people show up. The whole bottom section of the church is full. The balcony is full. And I remember I had to sit on the last row. And so Pastor Bailey's talking, so I can see people's responses because people don't know me.
Yeah.
And so I can see people's responses. They're like, what? Who's he? I don't know him. Yeah. And then you also have people who thought it was going to be them. So you deal with that, just with anything. But yeah, so.
Hold on. That's a whole message in itself, though. What God has for you is for you. And when I say being plan B, and that's a lot of times people need to hear that, because a lot of people are looking at their lives right now and they are second, third, fourth man on a totem pole, and they are, number one, envious sometimes of the people before them or that seem to be ahead of them. Sometimes it makes you question yourself and question your, like, you need more validation. You're questioning your worth because there's so many people ahead of you. But when God says it's your turn, there's not a devil in hell. It's not a man on this planet that can stop where God is assigning you. I never knew that Pastor Carter was not like the pick.
No, he was not the pick. He is plan B. And
oh, Lord Jesus, I thank you for sharing that. My God.
The blessing behind that season was when Pastor Bailey, so I just given birth. This is 2002. Okay, this is Caitlin. Caitlin's born because I remember I was holding Caitlin. And so after Pastor Bailey talks about how my husband's plan B, and he's like, listen, he's young. And he's in seminary. He
was young.
He's
Were
young.
y'all even 30 then?
No, we're 24.
Hold up.
24, 25.
Pastor Bailey passes away, and you got a 24-year-old about to...
He wasn't 24. He was 26, but he's named his assistant at 24.
But I'm just saying, even a man in their 20s about to take off on my church. Who is this kid?
And he's like, I'm going to walk alongside him. I'm going to this. And so my husband would go with him to doctor's appointments. And then when Pastor Bailey passes, I just found out I was pregnant with Kennedy. So he passes like 2005. Not 2005, 2003. And because I remember at the funeral, I was like, kind of like, I just found out I was pregnant. So I was like, yeah, that's not the time. But anyway, like I had passed out, but people thought I had passed out from the grief. No, I was passed out because I'm pregnant and I'm completely exhausted. But during that season, the time I will never, even before my husband was named his assistant, the time that Pastor Bailey poured into men was huge. And I feel like that's the reason why my husband pours into men, because of what Pastor Bailey poured into him and just the legacy of how he poured into him. And so, I mean, they would meet, like, he would meet with a group of men like 6 a.m., Pastor Bailey, and just pour life into them, talk about wins and losses. And that's just so huge. Again, giving back, pulling those people who are behind you and pulling them up so they can walk alongside you. So yeah, during that time, installation was like a whirlwind. Pastor Bailey had really trained Concord. He had trained us to not put him on a pedestal, to love just the man of God, and to love not just the man of God, but just love the Lord. And this is what we do. So there were certain people on staff that he had talked to them and said, you need to leave. There were certain members he said, I just need you to stay here 5 years. Give them a chance. I need you to pay this, or I need you to do this. Give him a chance. So just to lay that foundation, that's why it's so important. Like when you hear people talk about mentoring, when you hear people talking about walking alongside, that's what it's all about. And that's who E.K. Bailey was. He laid the foundation. Not only he preached it, like there were certain sermons. I remember, I think it was the first Sunday, they listened to a message that Pastor Bailey had preached like years ago. We're listening to it on tape because, this back then when you didn't have video or this, that. The message was so, I can't remember how old the message was, but we listened to it on video. And you're hearing his voice talk about when he's not here, or just what the purpose is of church and so on. Just huge, just such life lessons. As I'm thinking about it today, I'm like, dang, it's just flashing back to me because it's going to be 20 years next year.
That is crazy. So you're in your 20s and all of a sudden you're becoming a first lady, which you never in a million years thought that you would be. Because I also think that a lot of people, your husband had the calling.
Right.
That wasn't necessarily your calling.
I know.
And you are so funny. So now there's a level of, do you go through this thing of like, well, what does this mean? Do I got to start dressing like a first lady? Do I have to buy the church lady clothes?
Yes.
Like,
I have pictures. I have evidence that I had the shiny suit.
No, you did not.
Yes, I did.
And you better not have had chiffon sleeves. You did.
I did. I had the shiny suit. I had a design like on the back. Okay, in Dallas, like Camp Wisdom. Y'all remember Rita's? Yeah, dude. Yes. So like, you look, see, they giggling. Your team is giggling because they know.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd have all that get up. And what changed me was because that's what I thought they wanted me to be, because I had no clue what this first lady thing is. Also, our founding pastor's wife is still there, Dr. Sheila Bailey, who's an incredible speaker, incredible woman of God. But I was like, I think that's what they want me to be. And y'all, true story. I was so caught up with what I thought they wanted me to be that someone asked me to speak for Women's Day. I don't know why I did that. When I say, y'all, I died a horrible death. I died, y'all. It was horrible. I looked fabulous. I looked the part. I will give myself credit for that. But that message was...
It was trash. It was
straight trash. Like, if you looking like you see me, be like, oh, I see you make your little videos and you do whatever. If you follow me, I'm good. Couple minutes, I'm good. I'm great on the panel. But yeah, no, I got a good 10 minutes in me. That's about it. But I'm so glad I had that experience of dying. When you are dying from the stage or you're dying from the pulpit, I just remember my husband's face. He was just looking at me like, just get through it. And I want to say, you did this to me. So anyway, that was such a huge lesson for me. Y'all, and this is so funny. The person who invited me, I used to work with her at the elementary school that I taught at. And so I remember her face. She was like, oh, no, you can teach because I taught writing. She's like, you can teach that. Not this. But it was such a good lesson to me. After that, shortly, I had one of my little students, because I taught Sunday school. He came up to me. He saw me after service because we had an 8 o'clock service and 11 o'clock service. So I was at the 8 o'clock service, and he was like, man, I saw those same shoes on Shirley Caesar. Because, back then
Elsie.
on BET, you had Bobby Jones Gospel. And yes, that's how old I was dressing, y'all. No. That's how old I was dressing. And I immediately was like, a change is going to have to come.
This is such a valuable lesson. When we try to be something we not, we look crazy. And we don't even know how crazy we're looking because there's a part of us that's like, we really think we're doing something, and you were looking crazy.
I was looking stone cold crazy. And I will say this, my husband was really cool. When he first was installed, he was like, Stephanie, just find your way.
Yeah.
Just find your way. Mm-hmm. And I remember he was like, just go visit the different ministries and see where you want to get involved. Yeah. And I kind of was like, no. And I hid behind my kids because my kids were really, really little. And so I joined Bible Study Fellowship, and that gave me an outlet. Because if you know anything about Bible Study Fellowship, you just do your Bible lesson and like somebody would be like, aren't you the first lady? And so my little white lady, who would be over Bible study, who was over my group, she'd be like, we don't talk about that here. I was like, yeah, we don't. So it was a really safe place.
Yeah.
And
because this is so interesting to me because we never think about how this is affecting the woman that is supporting the man that was called by God. It doesn't mean, because I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of pressure. You see now, like you said, you have the women that are the first ladies that are doing the speaking and the this and the that, but nobody ever stops to say, how is this affecting you? How is this changing your life? Like, how are and you're having to hear the whispers. If you probably feeling the pressure, if you don't do what first ladies do, now you're going to be talked about.
Oh, yes.
They're looking at you crazy. Like, that is so interesting. Like, you know what? Kudos to you. And I don't think that people give you your flowers enough, seriously, because there's a lot of pressure. It's
a lot of pressure. And you know what? This is why I love Brian Carter. I did not find this out until after she passed. But he reached out to Dr. Lois Evans of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship. She is like the ultimate first lady to me, the Lady of Grace. I just love her. And so my husband reached out to her and he was like, hey, can you just be my wife's friend? And so she told him, what did you do? And he was like, nothing, but she's alone and she just needs a friend. And she called me, and of course she never tells me this. My husband never tells me this. And I remember telling my husband, Lois Evans reached out to me and she wants to take me to lunch. And we had the best time. And I remember her sitting down with me and just saying, I just want to take you to lunch. I don't want to talk about ministry. I just want to talk about you. And I was like, it was the best thing ever. I'm trying not to cry right now. Because she just was a friend to me and she did not have to be. And and when she passed, my husband, we were dropping some friends off at the airport, and he told me, he said, Lois was the one. I asked Lois to reach out to you and just to love on you and just be there for you and so on. And there were other pastors' wives along the way, like our founding pastor's wife. She's super fabulous, but I felt like I was bothering her because she's grieving her husband.
Sure. She's
grieving her husband, so I, in my own way, and she's probably gonna be like, no, I didn't feel this, but I felt like she's grieving her husband and she's also looking after her family. And I felt like she has served everybody and their mama and let her have this time. So that was like my own insecurity of not to approach her. And then there have been other first ladies who've reached out and been really, really super sweet to me. But Lois Evans, yeah, she was great.
I love your story. Because again, this is not about you necessarily being a first lady. This is not necessarily about ministry. It is about sometimes how in life we're thrown into a space that we weren't expecting and having to adjust. Sometimes we think our life is going this way. Yeah. And then God is like, nah, here's the audible. You're going to go in this direction. And this, how do you handle the discomfort, right?
Yeah.
How do you handle the transition? And that's why I love you, Elsie, because you're authentic enough to say there's a lot of insecurities involved. I think there's a lot of people going through that right now. You're probably working in an environment where you feel like you do not belong. You didn't fit the mold of the first lady. You get what I'm saying? You're like, you're young. You had plans. You wanted to live your best life. Like, this is your job. This is not my job. But now, like in certain careers, it's all of us. We in ministry now. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, I mean, again, I just think it's just so beautiful. Now, even me knowing you, but now to think about, I think people don't respect the now until they understand all of the hurdles. And they'll never know. Because they'll never know because you're classy enough, but they'll never know the mean ways people treated you. Because let's be clear, everybody in church is not nice.
Not everybody's not nice, but I will say this. Some things I brought on myself, just being my own, just not knowing. And then I tell anybody now. I remember when he got installed, a pastor told us, they will never see you as the pastor or first lady. Some people will never see you as that. And I'm not feeling like, that's not what you say to somebody on the installation.
Yeah, why would you
but
say? Yeah.
It was really, really good advice.
Okay.
Because to some people, I will never be their first lady, and that's okay.
Ooh.
Because the one thing about it is Pastor Bailey and Dr. Bailey and Dr. Sheila Bailey, they baptized kids. They were there at their funeral. They served together. They planted together. There are certain relationships that I can't just automatically expect that's going to happen. And once you realize that, you're good. And so on. It's just a respect thing. You respect that relationship. There's families in our church that have been there that are charter members and so on, but you respect it. And you don't take offense to it if they don't want you to speak at their funeral. In fact, I'll be like, great. No.
Yeah, no, seriously.
That's going to take me down. But I think just realizing that, and then being true to yourself, but still being respectful and so on. It's like with life. It's not just ministry. It's in life. There's some people who gonna love you, who gonna be down for you. Like they gonna see this podcast. They be like, oh yeah, oh that's my girl. I'm gonna go check her out. And there's some people like, oh, I don't really do her. And I think one thing I had to learn was some people love, some people like, some people like she can kick rocks. That's okay. Because it can't matter what other people think of me. And I can say that now at 49, and I'm not going to say it still does not hurt because there's always going to be some type of judgment, whether you're in ministry, whether you are a mom, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer, whatever it is, you're always going to have some type of judgment. But you have to know, you have to trust the fact that people who know me know that's not me.
Right.
And so if I had something happen, I had a person reach out to me and say, hey, this person said this about you. And, you have that one friend who hypes you up like, yeah, you need to get them. You need to respond. I was like, what am I going to do? Fight her?
Right.
What am I going to do? Post something? Post something back? I said, I have to trust the fact that the people who know me are going to know that that's a mess.
That's good.
And that's not her. So why should I waste this energy to go have some type of words with that person?
No, that's good.
Like, I don't want to see it. Now, I did call my college friends like, you won't believe
Of course you did.
what happened. And so I love my friends because my college friends were like, all right, as Michelle Obama would say, you stay high, but we gonna go low.
That is not what Michelle said, ma'am.
I know, they switched it.
Of course.
I have thug friends.
Yeah.
And so, and it was so crazy. And I text them like maybe within 20 minutes back. And I said, y'all, just leave it alone. I said, I've left this, I've given this to God, and I just need you to leave it alone. It's no use in going back tit for tat with this person.
Yeah.
They just want some attention.
Yep.
And I rest in that. And they're like, now you tell us.
Right, exactly.
But
I
my
love
friends later on, we got together. We all met up in D.C. like 2 weeks later. And they said that was just, it was like kind of like a respect thing. I said, yeah, because, back in the day, this had been 5-10 years ago. Or this had been like sooner days. It would have been on and popping. That person would have got cussed out. Smooth.
What is the most difficult I'm not even gonna say aspect. What is the most difficult thing about the label of being in ministry? Because I think we put so much pressure on people in ministry. That's why people run from the calling so often, because it's like, hold on, I don't want you to put that on me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the most difficult thing in ministry is when there is conflict, how to resolve the conflict peacefully. and so on. Because no matter what, somebody's going to be hurt.
Yep.
Somebody's going to be mad. Somebody's going to feel like you did me wrong or this, that. But when it all comes down to it, but you were wrong. Like, you can't be a pleaser. You can't be a pleaser.
Oof, that's tough.
And it's hard. And because you want, and I feel like with anything, not just ministry, I feel like with anything, you want to be liked on your job.
Sure.
You want to come to work and we at peace and we together. I feel like that's why everybody's an entrepreneur now, because they're just like, I'm my own boss.
Only person got to like me is me.
It's the only person got to like me is me. But when you're walking in that, I think when you realize, like, man, I've been bending over backwards for this person. I've been really trying to help this person. I've been having some grace with this person. And then they still turn around and do this. So I've had to learn how to balance that, because you do want, I mean, you're like, this is the church.
That's good. Do we often, as a community or just as people in general, does it sometimes feel like we don't allow people in ministry to be human?
I think that's why I'm really big on being transparent to the most part. One of my friends says, you have the gift of making people feel like they know everything about you, but they really don't know everything about you. You share enough to share.
Yeah, and as they shouldn't. There still is a level of privacy that you have to
Right.
maintain.
You still has a level of privacy, but I would tell anybody, the best advice, and it goes back to the Bailey family, was their best advice was to love the people. If you love the people, everything else will come in. And when I think of love the people, it just does not mean being nice to the people, but I think it also means being fair. I think being honest and saying, like, hey, I'm having a hard day. Or, you know what, when I'm doing this thing at our church right now called Fearless Mom. We're on break right now. But just sharing, now I get approval from my kids, but sharing things about like my own struggle and so on, because in this day and age, I don't want people to view us that we're on a pedestal. I want people to view us as, man, this is my Christian friend who's struggling just like me.
Ooh.
Who's struggling with being a good mom, being a good wife, being a good friend, being a good sister. And what does she do when she is having a problem or when she sins? Does she go to the Lord like me? Does she pray like me? I don't want people to feel like, oh, she has the perfect life. Back in the day, you assume people just had this perfect life. But it's not that. I want you to know, like, I struggle just like you. I struggle with friendships. I struggle with being a good mom. I struggle with being a good sister. I struggle with being a good wife sometimes. But I recognize that, and I'm putting a plan forward and stuff. Because, you know, sometimes people will just vent and be like, oh, yeah. No. Okay. You know what? I didn't have this perfect, I didn't see this perfect marriage, or I didn't see this, or I didn't see that. But I make an effort that I'm not going to be that type of parent. Like, no shade to my parents, because they did the best they can. But there's certain things that I'm going to make sure that I explain to my kids. That we are going to have a clear conversation about. I'm just not going to tell you not to have sex. Like, don't do it. The Lord, no. I'm going to explain to you why you should not have sex before marriage, what it can do to you, and what I've seen it do to other people, and so on.
And then whatever decision they make,
Yes.
you know, and see, that's another pressure is like, I remember oftentimes, you know, Sarah Jakes shares, you know, when she was 13, she had a child. And, you know, and I could even remember I was going to Oakland Bible Fellowship when I was younger, when his daughter ended up, you know, out of wedlock having a baby, and Lord having to bring her up in front of the church. And it's just the whole pressure of it's like your life sometimes, it seems from the outside looking in, now that I'm more mature. Because probably back then I probably thought, well, you know, this is what happens. But it's like when you're in a position, it's like your life sometimes doesn't belong to you. Everybody thinks that your life belongs to them also. So I respect you constantly fighting for the balance of still really just trying to be regular, you know?
Trying to be regular, but then also realizing that, like, with my kids, with my oldest, I want her to be Caitlin. I want Kennedy to be Kennedy. I want Carson to be Carson. And you know, when they chose their schools, like my middle one's in the process of choosing her school. She's down to 2. Lord, y'all just pray, Lord, that she makes a decision soon. But like my oldest, listen, she went from doing Nutcracker, like ballet, to she can drop it. Yeah.
She is a Delta S Spelman.
She's a Delta X Spelman. She's a step master. She is probably the best twerker she can probably be. However, the main thing that I told her was, the main thing I wanted to teach my girls and my son is that they know their worth. Not what society tells them, but what the Lord tells them. You know your worth. Like my kids are really big on, don't like. I think my daughter ended this little kind of thing with. She's gonna be like, don't be telling my business. But basically, she ended this little thing with this little boy. It was like a turnoff. He was trying to talk to her, and he was like, "Yeah, your brother and sister and your mom and dad." And she was like, "I don't even post them." So the fact that you are digging into my life to see who I am is a complete turnoff to her.
Definitely weird. Yeah,
that's weird. She was like, "That's weird."
Good for her. Good for her.
Yeah.
In recognizing those red flags.
But there's some really good people that have helped me kind of like. There's some really good people that have helped me like, shown me like, let your kids be your kids, and I ain't gonna put them on blast, but I remember when my daughter started dancing at Morehouse. She's like is majorette. She's not dancing next year, so you missed it. But go on my Instagram, you can see her. She was great. And I remember she was like, I love that you post her. I love that you post her doing her stands. I love you post her on the field, this, that. And that she's living her best life. Like when people meet her, they'll be like, girl, you living your best life. And so on. And it's the same thing with Kennedy. It's like, I don't want you to make the church your world. I'm more concerned with your relationship with Christ. And I need you to find your identity in what you like.
Ooh, that's good.
Not what the church thinks you like. And I love that the church has not made them into that.
But it started from leadership.
It starts with leadership.
You didn't allow them to do that because you didn't do that. You allowed them to be human. You allowed them to be teens. You're allowing them to be kids. Yeah. Like,
they're bad. Like when they were like going through their stage where they're really bad. Like I was like that mom. Like I would spank you on the spot, and so like I'd pick you up from nursery and they're like, yeah, she was. Oh yeah. I was like, oh, okay. I'm taking off my big hat, putting it down, rolling up my sleeves because I'm about to spank you, and they're like, no, don't spank her. I'm like, no, she's gonna get this.
Yeah.
Because I need her to know that it's not okay. Because I love the church, because the church, they love our babies and so on. However, I can't let you enable her.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good.
I can't let you enable her. Because if you enable her, she gonna feel like this is my world.
Yep.
Like you own everything. I'll never forget my son. He did this. This is so hilarious. I was picking him up. He didn't know I was standing at the door at Sunday school. And so he and his little friends, he's in there with some staff kids. And my son is quiet. And he was like, they were like, yeah, my dad is this on staff. And the other and then Carson, what's your dad? He's like, you already know who my dad is. And I was like, get over here. You are nothing. This is not why we're here.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that's great. I love that. Well, congratulations on everything. But I would honestly say congratulations more so on just continuing to find who you are. Because I know in life, like you're saying, you have kids going off to college, continuing to redefine who you are, continuing to not let the pressure of what society says you should be in this position. And again, everybody deals with this. I think one of the messages I want people to walk away from today is stop letting the world tell you who you're supposed to be and figure out who you're supposed to be on your own, right? The church world could have put you in this box if you would have let them. And they started to. You were Shirley Caesar for a minute. You know what I
was. and you know what I think is hilarious? I wouldn't even say the church put me in that box. I put myself in that box.
Yes. I love that you take that accountability. But it's the perception of what we think the church world would want us to do. And I think in life, it's not about, we're not watering down God's word. You know what I mean? Because you got on a blazer and a turtleneck and some jeans right now. That's not, non-biblical per se, but it is, you're you. You show up as you, and you show up flawed, you show up trying.
Tired.
Tired, all of the things, and you'll talk on it, and you'll speak on it, and I think that helps so many people say, wow, look at my first lady, because oftentimes she's just like me. Because we grew up sometimes in a world of seeing a pastor and a church lady, and the way that they acted seemed so unattainable. And that was our example. And it doesn't give us an excuse to just do whatever the heck we want to do per se, but it is good to see just real people that love the Lord, and we're all in this walk together. So
I love that. We're all in this walk together.
Yeah, for sure. So how can people watch you and your journey and your babies and your babies doing the dancing and everything? How can they keep in touch with you on social media?
So I am on Instagram. I don't really do Facebook, but I am on Instagram at Miss Steph Carter, and you can follow me there. And and my husband is Brian Carter. And so watch out for the people who, be doing fake accounts. If you ever see us asking for money, that's not us. So,
my God, it's been happening to me lately. So I'm like, what the heck? Like,
I know.
I'm not asking anybody for
We
some
need
money.
a blue check. We need a blue check.
Instagram, hook it up. You know what I'm saying? For real. No, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you for pouring. And just thank you for being who you are. I really, really, truly appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Means a lot.
Thanks for having me.
Yay. Thanks for the support. Make sure you subscribe to the Dash Podcast YouTube channel. Also, we're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. And feel free to share it with some family and friends. Thanks, guys.